What's up? I'm Quincy Dawson, and welcome back to the greatest teacher of all time, where I interview teachers of color, tie their personalities, strategies, and philosophies on education. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and visit greatestteacherofalltime.com to help me support more great teachers like Amica. What's up, Miss Biami?
Biami.
Biami. There we go.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
How's it going?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for being here. This is super cool how we met and we connected this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first off, you are in Chicago and
hmm
you are an 11th grade teacher. And what class do you teach?
Yeah, I'm a 11th and 12th grade special education English teacher.
Okay. And how's that going? Special ed teacher.
It's going pretty well. I teach on the south side of Chicago. Um, so yeah, our population is pretty much it's a Black school, so I like teaching students who look like me. Um, this school year is going really well. This is the first year that I'm teaching upperclassmen, and so I've been with some of these students since they were freshmen. So we have a pretty strong relationship.
Okay, that's great. So you've been with them for a while. So is special ed something you've been doing, or did you pivot from other classes to this one?
Well, for as long as I've been teaching, I've been in special education, but this is actually like probably my second or third career. So yeah, before this,
Okay.
I was in hospitality management. So I worked in hotels for a little while. I worked in event management for a little while. And then a random turn of events led me to substitute teaching and then eventually going through a program to get my own classroom.
Wow, that's so interesting because usually, and I guess in my teacher space, you hear that being a teacher has so many skills that can translate outside of the classroom. So people go from teaching to other things. How did it feel to go from other things to teaching? Do you think your skills transferred easily?
I think so. I think it was a combination of like skills that I had built, also personal interests and personalities. Like once I got in the classroom, I feel like I felt the most comfortable there compared to all the other jobs I had. I remember thinking like maybe the first year of teaching, like my hardest day teaching was not, it did not feel the same as my hardest day at another job.
That's so interesting. So wait, harder or easier,
Well,
or
more
just different?
difficult in different ways, but never so difficult as to like want to quit. I feel like I remember days at the hotel and days in event production where I'm like, I could go home right now. It's been challenging for sure teaching, but never to the point of like, I'm ready to walk out right now.
Okay, well, that's a good thing, and hopefully we'll
Yeah.
keep you in a few more years after this too. Yeah. So maybe just starting out. So I met you at I guess the end of summer, beginning of the school year.
Yes.
And I just want to know how has it been going since then? How did the school year start and how is it now?
So we're still kind of at the beginning of the school year. So we just wrapped up our like the first 5 weeks of school. So we're about midway through that first quarter. Um, so far, it's going really well. Every day is pretty smooth. I feel like I've got my routines now. I have great relationships with the students. I think I've got like a good balance of um, like my responsibilities at work. Um, yeah, so I think it's going really well so far.
Okay, that's good to hear. I'm also curious about getting started in the school year, right? So, when I was younger, at least for one of my class, my AP classes, they gave us summer work,
Mhm.
right? And it was like a huge, thick book we had to like close read and everything throughout the whole summer, and it was a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel like for me, the only purpose it served was to get you ready for the pace of the school year,
Yeah.
right? So, how do you feel about that? Do you give summer work? Do you think it's important?
Um, I don't know about the importance, but like I said earlier, for the community that I'm in the south side of Chicago. And so I think it isn't really feasible to to assign summer work and to get it back. Um, Even homework, I think, is a stretch sometimes. I've definitely assigned homework and I've gotten some assignments back, but it isn't like other districts. Like when I was in high school, I had homework all the time. We had summer work too, but I definitely know that I had resources to like get those things done. And I think a lot of the students that I serve don't have those same resources. So it's, I don't know, it's hard to expect them to figure out how to get it done.
Yeah, I hear that. And I guess that's more about just knowing your students and knowing your audience and catering to them, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. So when I was in elementary school, I wasn't given any summer homework, but I had the type of mom and parents who would give me like these summer workbooks to just work
Yeah.
through on my own, like extra reading assignments, extra math assignments. And I don't know how it helped me now. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But I don't know. How do you feel about that? Do you think being an English teacher, your students can benefit from doing side work on the summer like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially, we're probably going to get into this, but especially after the pandemic and like those 2 years, where learning was just like so different. I feel like all students need extra time and interventions to get caught up.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And especially after the pandemic, right?
Mhm.
So I do want to get into more pandemic stuff, but first, let's hear a word from our sponsor, Teachers of Color Matter.
Friend, we need to talk. As a teacher of color with a social justice mindset, I know if I give big to my students, I also need to replenish big to myself. My Clap for Yourself 5-minute reflection journal is perfect. This journal was designed for teachers of color, so it takes my experiences in the classroom to heart. And friend, this journal has everything. It helps me address feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, and self doubt. I can either fill out a template on the right side or process a larger issue on the left. The templates bring more intention and success into my day, and I can use the adult coloring moments when I'm calling a parent or during a staff meeting. And Dr. Michelle has written letters to me throughout the book. It's almost as if she's reading my mind. The inspirational quotes remind me that I'm part of a legacy. Representation matters, and I do make an impact. What does your morning routine look like?
All right, welcome back. So, Amica, I wanted to ask you about the effects of the pandemic and how students are doing now,
Mhm.
right? And maybe just to give an example, so when I started teaching after the pandemic, I think that was my last year, one of my last years, and I had my 10th grade students. And bring them back into the classroom, they felt like, or it felt like they were actually eighth grade students, right? Like the last time they were actually in a classroom with expectations, everything was almost 2 years ago, right? So I'm wondering for you, how do you feel with your students now? I know we're a couple years removed from the pandemic, but how's
Yeah.
it feel?
Um, I think I can say the same. I think when the pandemic happened, I was teaching a sophomore class as well. And I remember we were right in the middle of like, we were writing an essay on Martin Luther King. And I was so excited because we were just about finished with the essay. I had like made these different like outlines for them and everything. And then we took a break and we just didn't come back for 2 years. Um, and so, yeah, I definitely see the same effect that you mentioned. Kids are, like their maturity kind of paused right around that break. The growth and the different skills that they're developing paused. Um, and that's not to say that we weren't teaching when we were teaching remotely or kids um, weren't learning, but it was just so different from what they were used to and what we were used to. I don't feel like it was effective. So seeing whole classes of students just kind of 2 years behind in all kinds of skills, academic skills, social skills, all of that.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I know one way like the districts tried to combat that was by not having testing for certain years. But
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe now if you're still feeling the effects, how are you approaching that with your students? Are you doing anything differently than you were before 2020?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest difference for me is how I approach teaching in general. I think before remote learning, I, as a teacher, did not have very many like boundaries between like work and home and like um, planning and things like that. So I remember being just always available and also like feeling like there was this to do list of different tasks um, related to the school day that I needed to get done. And like once I got those things done, then it would be the time where I could rest. And I kind of had that like mindset for everything. And so I applied that. I had that same expectation for my students. Like once we get through these things, then we can celebrate, then we can rest.
Interesting.
Um,
Sorry, interrupt. Do you think that pace of the things on the to-do list changed? Like, do you see yourself
Definitely.
going slower because you have to, or because you think it's needed?
Well, definitely. So like during remote learning, I definitely learned that to-do list is like never ending. Like there's always going to be something that's added. And so unless I intentionally carve out space for breaks and for celebration and for things other than working, then um, those things aren't going to come. And so um, yeah, like I said, that translates to how I teach too and the expectations I have for students. And so I find myself now paying more attention to how students are learning, and if they are struggling and it seems like they need a lesson retaught, I'm quicker now to reteach the lesson and to slow it down a little bit and to give an extra day or give some extra time, um, just to make sure that they really get that skill. And then I'm also quicker to incorporate like celebrations or make space for like relationship and social emotional things. I definitely did social emotional things before, but it was like more uh, and into like the agenda of the class instead of like organically giving the students what they needed or what they were asking for. And I think that's another thing too. I think I'm more open to allowing the students to like shape the class. I remember last week we were doing an assignment and um, maybe it was a Wednesday or so, and they were doing a test. And then we had like a reading day scheduled for Thursday. And so I'm like, we can finish this test on Friday because we have our reading day on Thursday. And the kids were like, let's actually, can we just do the test tomorrow since it's like fresh in our minds? We'll probably do better. And so I was able to be flexible and just let them kind of adjust our schedule for the week.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that with the testing schedule, also with celebrations too, because I
Mhm.
think one thing that I guess is obvious from the pandemic is that we never know when this may be our last time face to face, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
we really need
true.
to, yeah, so we really need to like cherish these moments and make them valuable and meaningful.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I would even add, like that year, those kids, that those sophomores that I talked about, that they were the first students, I think, of my career that would have graduated. And so when we got to their senior year, I believe like only two or three of the students that I had in my self-contained classroom actually graduated. And I remember there was like a lot of feelings around that. And a lot of things I had to process just around like, how I'm doing as a teacher and like what my actual goal is, like what the point of teaching is. And I think when I started my career, I was thinking that like this is the point. We want the kids to graduate. This is why we're doing what we're doing. And so I had to reevaluate. And I think it's more than just that. Like obviously we're there to support them in graduating and moving on to post-secondary success, but there's so much more in between that's just as meaningful.
Yeah, seriously, yeah. The things that, because of course, getting you to graduate is the teacher and the school's goals, but sometimes students may have other things in mind. Like they just want to have fun, right?
Yeah.
So if you're able to meet your goal of graduating along with their goal of having fun, that makes it feel like the best classroom.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. And maybe kind of cycling back to what we talked about in the beginning with students needing that extra practice, right? Are you finding that your students do need that extra practice with things after the pandemic?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a special education teacher.
Right.
So just forever, my students have always needed extra practice in all the things, in all the ways. Um, so I don't know if it's more so now. I think maybe I'm noticing where the students that I have, their reading levels are always, have historically been like below grade level. Now I think they're just way, way, way below grade level.
Yeah, and that extra practice definitely can do it. But yeah, it sounds like you're doing it. One thing that students do practice all the time inside and outside school is talking to each other. Right? So that was my little segue to our next thing we're going to talk about. And it's actually this post from an account on Instagram called Schools for People. And it's titled, Please Don't Grade Discussions. So yeah, it's a post with a couple of pictures with some writing on it. But the caption starts off by saying, grading discussions may give you short-term results, but at what cost? It goes on to say things like discussions are hard and good discussions are harder. Grading discussions assumes that being quiet in a discussion is a bad thing. Grades don't motivate good, sincere discussions. And grading discussions smothers internal motivation, right? So, first off, I know this happened to me in school. Like, you read a chapter and then come back to the class the next day and discuss it. Teacher will like mark you off for the talking that you did or didn't do. How do you feel about this in your classes right now, your diverse learning classes?
Yeah, I would say, I think that applies to just grading in general. Like anytime you grade anything, that becomes the motivation. I want to earn an A on this. Um, so I think I've been learning that you don't have to grade every single thing. Um, and you don't have to decide on like what things, they don't have to be the same all the time. So like maybe we had a discussion, a whole group discussion on week one. We had an essay that week and we um, did some annotation that week. So maybe I'm grading that essay or maybe I'm grading the annotation and the discussion is just a discussion, just to see like what the thoughts are and things like that. And then as weeks go on, like we have more discussions, um, and like I may grade them at random. Um, I think when I do grade discussions, though, I tell students that it is graded. Um, and there's certain things that I'm listening for. So it's going to be different depending on the discussion, depending on our essential question, our standards that we're measuring. Um, and in those instances, like it is necessary to speak because you're demonstrating that you can like present your thoughts in a clear way. And if you don't say anything, then you haven't presented your thoughts. Um, but I provide conversation stems. We pause sometimes in the middle of the discussion and we talk about what's going well and where we can improve. We think about like who's kind of dominating the discussion, who hasn't said anything, and like how we can bring those quieter peers in. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think that's like the important part to focus on, right? Because you start off by saying that any type of grading like devalues what you're doing, right? And I think it's maybe the learning part's the important part, but then the grading or the assessment is like the formal part where like, okay, I need to actually show this skill, right?
yeah,
I'm thinking along with this post with a discussion, it's hard to grade something that's supposed to be organic, you know? I
mhm.
guess from what you're saying is you try to develop those skills of different students, right? So like the ones who aren't speaking as much, are you, I guess, trying to teach the students who are quiet to speak up more? Or are you trying to teach the ones who are speaking a lot to tone it down more? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, and I think, um, like I said, it isn't just one instance. So there's a lot of different types of discussions. And so sometimes maybe that is the goal is like, how can we have equity of voice? And like where if I'm someone who I have a lot of opinions and I'm always sharing and I'm cutting people off, then yeah, that's a social skill and a communication skill that you need to learn. Um, like maybe I can pause for a second and allow someone else to share their thought and I'm just listening. Um, other times, maybe it is like, what is your thought on this particular theme? And I need to hear from everyone. And so there's like a lot of different ways you can do discussions. I use fishbowl discussions sometimes where like the kids have partners and one of those partners is a coach. And so there's like an inner circle and they're talking, and then there's a peer kind of observing their partner, and then they're taking down what their partner could do better and what they're doing well, and then we break and they give them feedback and then they go again. There's just kind of the traditional discussion where everybody's in the conversation at the same time, and it's kind of like get in where you can fit in.
And that's hard though, right?
Yeah.
So
I
like
think
imagine
the key is just switching it up and not always doing it one way. And I think the more variety you have, the more equitable it is for everyone in the room.
yeah, definitely. I was just talking to a friend about like assessing how I am in conversations like group settings.
Yeah.
And I hate meeting new people in a huge group and having to converse in that way, right? Like I'd rather do like the one-on-one or like a small group. So,
Same.
right?
Like I think my biggest thing is I don't want to try to like cut anybody off or like talk over anybody. So I could have like the greatest idea, but I'm not gonna say it if it's too much work to like try to get in the conversation.
Exactly. And who's to say, oh, you didn't talk that much because you're in a big group? D. Like, wait, what? No, that's just how I communicate. Yeah, so interesting. And yeah, I think these skills can also be used for other things too, like not just in your English class, but also in a history or maybe in a science class or math class
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have to communicate for everywhere, wherever we're at. So yeah.
Seriously, seriously. Wow. Thank you so much for this, Amica. Your thoughts on your students and giving them or not giving them summer work, how they're doing before and after the pandemic, and also how you think about grading discussions are all part of the reasons why I think you might be one of the greatest teachers of all time.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course. And also, thanks to my sponsors like Costco, Teachers of Color Matter, Victorious RED Restoration, and a couple of anonymous donors. We'd actually like to give you this $150 gift card to use with you or your students or whatever you choose.
Ooh, thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course. You deserve it. All right. Thank you to everyone else for watching The Greatest Teacher of All Time, where I, Quincy Dawson, interview teachers of color, type their personalities, strategies, and philosophies on education. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. And if you really liked the video, leave a comment for me and Mika to see. Also, if you are the greatest teacher of all time, or if you know the greatest teacher of all time, let me know. Go to greatesteacherofalltime.com and click on Submit a Teacher. Hope to see you soon.